I'm Daryl McIntyre. Thank you for joining us. This is our very first Raised with Care Stewardship Sessions. We will be doing a number of these over the next 9 weeks. We will be talking about animal health, about working with veterinarians, about making sure that you have protocols in place to ensure that your animals are in good shape. And we'll be able to do it through this live stream, and it's going to be interactive. And our focus is doing this with Alberta livestock producers, animal owners. We're going to be discussing some of the issues that producers face, how to identify some of those health issues, what to do about it, really about prevention strategies to try and make sure that the big problems don't crop up all of a sudden. Talk about having a relationship with a veterinary team to ensure that you have all of the material that you need in order to go forward with good animal health and animal welfare, antimicrobial stewardship, and then all of this comes into, of course, your bottom line. How much money do you have to pay for all this kind of stuff, and how can you really manage some of that? So in the coming weeks, we're going to talk on a number of subjects. So tonight we're talking about the beef industry. We'll be dealing with cow-calf, we'll be dealing with feedlots, but primarily on beef tonight. Down the road next week, we'll be talking about horses, then there's chickens, there's pigs, sheep, goats, dogs and cats. We'll even be talking about the commercial bee operations here in Alberta, with apiculture being a topic. So the goal in doing this is to provide animal owners the opportunity really to engage directly with experts, people who have been doing this for years, who know what they're doing, talking about some of your challenges, talking about best practices, what worked great 10 years ago that maybe needs to be tweaked a little bit now in order to improve your health. And again, it's going to be a live interactive forum, so we really want you to get involved. If you have some questions or comments, we want you to be able to do so through the chat. Since we're on YouTube Live and Facebook Live, you'll have that opportunity. And then in the future ones, if just in case you don't have it written down, you can always make sure you can access these sessions through the raisedwithcare.ca website. You can follow the links through that, but it's raisedwithcare/stewardship-sessions, and you'll be able to access all the future ones. So today we're looking at the beef industry, as I mentioned. For some 200 years now, Alberta beef producers have been providing the very best in beef for Canada and certainly for around the world. Alberta ranchers and families raise the best beef anywhere. In fact, for Alberta producers, we raise 40% of the nation's beef, which is an extraordinary number considering what is happening here. 40% of the beef cattle are here in our province. We also have 70% of the feedlot capacity, 70% of the processing capacity in all of Canada. So really, Alberta is and continues to be the center for beef production in our nation. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about cow-calf operations, we'll talk about feedlot operations, see where they sort of overlap a little bit and where some of the similar concerns are and very specific concerns are with each of those kinds of operations. Now, I actually was raised on a farm near Vermilion. I have an acreage. I have friends who have cattle, so I have a general overview of the industry, but not an expert by any stretch. And that's why we have a couple of them to help guide us through this stewardship session. Let me introduce you to them. We have two distinguished veterinarians, also cattlemen themselves, Dr. Pat Burrage and Dr. Roy Lewis. Let me tell you a little bit about them before we hear from them, because once they start, they're not going to stop. Just a heads up. Dr. Pat Burrage went to the Western College of Veterinary Medicine and graduated in 1989. Spent the first half of his career owning and operating a mixed animal practice in southern Alberta, then the past 17 years in central Alberta with a mixed animal practice in Bluffton, and is back in southern Alberta with consulting services to feedlot and cow-calf clients, and also mentorship to younger veterinarians, which is a very important part of what he's doing now. He's been involved with ABVMA throughout his career and is currently vice president of the association. So we'll hear from Pat in just a moment. Let me introduce you as well, and many of you probably already know him, Dr. Roy Lewis, also a graduate of WCVM. That was back in 1981. I graduated high school that year, by the way, when you graduated that. He was a partner at the Westlog Veterinary Clinic until January of 2013. Also been an animal practitioner for 38 years, mostly in beef cattle, very much interested in preventative medicine, talking about animal welfare. He's written lots of articles in a number of publications, including Western Producer, for example. Technical services veterinarian for Merck Animal Health, did that for 8 years, and still a farmer at heart. Part of a family-owned cattle and mixed farming operation near Spruce Grove. So, gentlemen, nice to see you here. We have Pat Burrage here in studio, and then Roy's joining us from out on the farm. I don't know how your bandwidth is doing. You look like you might be in the Arctic somewhere, Roy.
Yeah, I'm not too far out of town, but hopefully the Moccasin Telegram will get out to the people from here. I'm hoping anyway.
Hopefully. Nice to see you here, Pat. Nice to see you as well. And with this, we want this to be a conversation, right? So if you want to jump in on what Roy's talking about, vice versa, Roy, if you want to jump in on what Pat is talking about, that's fine. Just here in studio, if we can get the audio up a little higher so I can hear Roy a little bit better, hopefully you're going to be able to hear him at home too. And as we go through with our conversation, by all means, jump into that chat session and throw out some comments or questions or concerns, and we'll see where we go. But I'll tell you what, why don't we start, Pat, because I haven't even let you talk yet. How are you?
Good, thanks, Daryl. Glad to be here. Yeah.
This is really important to you. It's important to all vets, and certainly through the ABVMA, but really talking about some of the health issues that producers might be facing. What are the major ones? You always hear about lameness. It could be hoof rot. It could just be a limp or something like that. But most producers are pretty on top of what kind of ailments are going to hit their operation, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, most producers are up to speed on what's going on. I mean, as veterinarians, we always see the bad things because the simple things can be fixed and fixed at home. And again, that's part of us as being part of a team. We work with producers, and of course, producers rely on us for the more difficult issues. Yeah. We spend a lot of time trying to avoid those, and in conversation with our producers, if there's things we can do to mitigate the risk associated with health disorders, then we certainly want to keep those producers up to speed on that sort of thing.
What do you see more often? Is it lameness? Is it stuff like scours or parasites? Like, what are the primary issues that you might hear about or might have to guide a producer through?
Well, we like to think that every year is the same, but it never is. And so certainly we see 2 times of the year, and our calving season is sort of the haying season for the primary producer. That's where the newborn calves are born, and so there are a lot of issues associated with that time of the year. The other time of the year, of course, is when we're weaning those calves from their mothers and preparing them to feed those out. And so the spring is the biggest time for the cow-calf producer, no question. And we've got lots of statistics out there that say, hey, that your highest peak incidence of death occurs in the first 14 days of life. So that's where we really want to focus our time and focus our efforts. When those cows are calving, that's the time we need to pay attention. So,
and Roy, with feedlot operations, how much overlap do you have, or are there much more specific kinds of health issues that you would see in a feedlot?
Yeah, I mean, the what Pat mentioned in the spring wouldn't be there, but the weaning time would be really similar to what the feedlots get, right? Because sometimes the calves are weaned and then taken directly to the feedlot, so they see the weaning type issues. Lameness would be, I guess, common really throughout their life from calves, different types of lamenesses, but lameness would be the other thing in the feedlots that they're trying to really work with their veterinarians to try to determine the type of lameness and whether it needs treating or whether it's something that can be prevented and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes, we talk about antimicrobial stewardship and that kind of thing. How much is our producers, both with cow-calf or with feedlots, relying on antibiotics anymore? It's a much different environment these days, is it not?
It's tremendously different since the new regulation. When we say that, prior to the regulation where everybody had access to antimicrobials, it was sort of if it looks like something's wrong, let's give it an antibiotic. Since 2018, things have changed. We've had to get better. Veterinarians have had to get better and determine if we have an issue, is an antibiotic going to make the difference? And so there's been a significant reduction in the amount of antibiotics used just because we're using them more wisely.
Well, and we keep hearing, like, with people, and I know producers, but there'll be some consumers maybe watching, because it's important for them to know where their beef is coming from and what kind of stewardship is there to help take care of them. But the old people one was, not all bugs need drugs, right? So, but that translates into the beef industry and other animals as well.
Absolutely. And having said that, Roy and I both raise cattle ourselves, and we have to be cautious. When I was a younger veterinarian, and I had a calf that wasn't feeling well, I used to think it had an antibiotic deficiency, meaning that I should reach for something and that's going to fix it. And it's certainly over time you start to figure out not everything needs antibiotics. And so it's our responsibility as veterinarians to ensure that we get antibiotics into the hands of producer for conditions that need it, but certainly give them guidance when they don't need it also.
Well, and that comes up with coming up with a good protocol. And Roy, like in a feedlot, because this is a business, it's a different kind of a world than in a cow-calf operation, right? There's a much bigger team there and a lot more cattle, obviously. So there's a lot more to stay on top of, right?
Yeah, and I mean they've got usually the nutritionist team, the health team, and the processing or feedlot checkers, if you like, have distinct protocols for if calf A has a fever and looks like this, it's deemed to be maybe pneumonia, and they've got a first drug, second drug, that sort of thing, and also really good computer records to keep track of also the withdrawals on those drugs, because they're the critical ones as far as the food safety goes, because those animals are going to go off to be marketed sooner. The cow-calf guy kind of is a little more removed from that generally with the little calves, because they're not going to be eaten essentially for another year. So that's another reason to really keep good track of that, and giving the drugs properly in the right way and the right dose, and not overusing them, for sure.
The whole idea of working with a veterinary team or having a protocol, a health protocol, do you think that's already in place for most feedlots? Is that an area that we need to address?
Yeah, I really think so. I really, I always stand and kind of wave the flag for the producers. I think some of them are way ahead of, even some of the regulations that were put in the beef code and that sort of thing, using their veterinarians, working as a team to try to minimize sickness, prevent sickness, secondarily minimize mortality, but then also using the right drug at the right time at the right dose, and that may or may not include antibiotics all the time. I mean, there's a lot of instances now where painkillers are used for things like lameness that we don't even go down the antibiotic path anymore, and a lot of them are well aware of that, and work again with their veterinary team and learn more as time goes on. We often get called for those one-off things. And I think Pat can allude to this, the things that are kind of normal, the producers really get to know what to use, and then there'll be one thing that they've never seen before. And then that's sometimes where we come in. And in fairness, even after 30, 40 years, we see things that we haven't seen before. So it's always a little bit of a learning curve, and you're always changing up a little bit as you go.
I guess when we talk about preventative medicine, and it can be the same with humans or with anything else, but if you can prevent these major problems, you're ideally not even going to have to call your vet as often. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. We, with vaccination protocols in place, we certainly increase the health of the herd. And
that's part of the protocol. You guys talk about having a protocol and having a system set up basically to ensure that your animals are healthy. Just sort of run me through what a protocol might be.
So in a cow-calf operation, we'd look at critical times of the year, and certainly pre-calving would be a time that we'd like to vaccinate cows or bred heifers for a scour vaccine to prevent that scours that we see in young calves in the spring. Certainly fall, we would use respiratory vaccines to minimize the risk to respiratory disease in those weaned calves. And certainly there are vaccines that we'd establish at times of the year for those cows to minimize the risk to reproductive disorders. So we maximize our reproductive efficiency, as many cows pregnant as we can when we put them out to breeding pasture. So there's a whole host of things that can be done throughout the year, but it just minimizes the risk to disease. And Roy and I are old sort of hands at this, and we'd rather not see disease anymore. We'd rather prevent it.
Well, that's an interesting concept, isn't it?
And
you're radical.
Yeah, but over time, and the fun of it is it costs less to vaccinate than it would to treat. And so we've been through the scour wrecks, we've been through the respiratory wrecks, and we see sort of the devastation that can occur. But we believe in the vaccines because we've seen how that's worked also. And if we never have another scour wreck, we will be happy, but we seem to find them every year. And so minimizing the risk is a key with vaccine, and just working through a protocol with your local veterinarian is the way to make that happen.
Well, give me an idea, because you guys talk to producers, both feedlots or cow-calf operations. What's the general sense? And certainly any of you who are watching, and if you want to chime in on this, the chat windows are available, so you can jump in there as well. What's the general feel about what you're talking about creating protocols? Are most people on that path right now and agreeing and seeing that it works for them? Roy, since you're out there, I'll let you go.
Yeah. And again, most of them, I find, and I think Pat will allude to this, that, our clients will be a real variation. There'll be some that drive us to the newest thing out there, and they're always kind of ahead of the curve. And then there's a general population, a few that follow. But it's some things that we have chimed and tried to educate our clients over years, and again, some are at different levels. There's no question. Every herd can be a little bit different, so there'll be slight variations. It's not necessarily a cookbook where one recipe fits all in all cases, and where Pat practiced in Bluffton could be slightly different than where I was up in Westlock. But there's probably about 80% of that norm that is pretty much an industry standard. I kind of call it the core vaccines, the ones that are absolutely necessary, in my opinion, to do. And I would say the vast majority of producers are on that wavelength. Where we fall down a little bit sometimes is, again, the cow-calf guy that's weaning his calves and right off to market, because sometimes they get missed there. But that's why the feedlots develop that protocol right when they come in. They don't take any chance as far as what went on prior to that calf. And there may be a little bit of redundancy in the industry of over vaccinating, but that's probably way better than under vaccinating.
And vaccinations are entirely different than antibiotics, which lots of people like to talk about these days. Would you agree that most people are on the same
Yes.
same wavelength, Pat, too?
Yeah, I think so, and it's improving all the time.
Well, let's see if we can find some areas that people might not think of. Maybe some producers haven't thought of it. Do you go and you will actually do sort of a farm check, or just check to see what are you looking for? Is it facilities? Is it feed? Or like if you're going to try and set up a protocol and you make a visit out to a farm, what are you looking for? What are you trying to help people change or adjust?
So we really don't look for anything in the beginning. We have that conversation with the producer, and so we call it a client profile. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it, but one of the things I really want to know, have you had problems in the past? And especially if it's a new producer. Those producers we've been working for years, we sort of understand and know what's going on in their operations because we're there routinely. Yeah. The new guys are the ones that, have we had issues before, or do they perceive that they have issues? And once we sort of nail that down, then we start to target if there is a problem. One of the things that
what's creating it.
Yeah. So one of the things we see the most of is scour issues. So that's young calves that get diarrhea, tough to treat sometimes, a whole host of different bugs that can cause it. So minimizing the risk to that is all about management. And so vaccines are part of a management protocol, but there's a whole host of things that can be done. So we will look at facilities. We will look at how the herd has moved throughout the year, where they're placed in calving, what's going on during the calving season. There's all kinds of things that can be done out there, but it's all part of a package, and that's what having the veterinarian involved sort of.
Is there anything that you brought to somebody that sort of popped up in their head and they went, well, it never even occurred to me that might be an issue?
well,
you don't have to be specific and name the individual either. So.
Well, no, and so it is, but part of it is, and so anytime you increase numbers, you increase risk. And so we look at heifers, first calf heifers. This is a female cow that's having their first calf, as being high risk to scours. They're generally not good mothers. They milk a little less than, and so there's a whole bunch of things that go along with that. Well, if you double your number of heifers that you're calving, you increase the risk to scours significantly. And so sometimes our breaks or our scour issues occur when a guy just jumps his heifers from, he's calving out 25 heifers last year and this year he's calving 50, and boom, it happens, and he can't understand why. And it's just one of those numbers games, and
it's almost statistics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Water sources, is that an issue as well?
It doesn't seem to be. In the south, it's a little more challenging. And when I say that, if we have standing water, dugouts can be a problem late in the summer, that high concentrations. But as far as organisms go, that's sort of minimal risk. Standing water in a calving corral can be problematic. Yes.
Roy, I'm curious. Same question though. Anything that popped up that you were able to help somebody with that it didn't occur to them that might have been an issue?
Yeah, I think I think Pat hit it right on the head in the sense that a lot of the producers, at least more in the past, would think about that magic bullet, right? That magic antimicrobial, that magic vaccine that would work. And usually there may be one, but it's tied in together with all those management changes. So I like what Pat said there, and I fortunately probably had a little more time to do that when I was a technical services veterinarian, searching out supposed, vaccine breaks, where we would literally, especially calving, we'd go after calving and we would walk through just what the guy did with the calves. And usually you'd pinpoint something, and half the time or 3/4 of the time, the producer probably had a pretty good idea, but he just needed a little nudge to do a little bit different management scheme. It might be divide the, only put 50 cow-calf pairs in a pen and then move to the next pen so you don't get that concentration that Pat mentioned.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. So sometimes it can be a relatively inexpensive fix, but it's more of a management change, or it's a planning thing to be prepared for next year. And so that, combined with the vaccines, and that is really where we get, I think, our biggest gains really for the producer. If there's buy-in and we can get that management change with the right vaccine, et cetera. So.
And are there different operations that might need different vaccines? I'll let you jump in on that, Pat. Does everybody run the same vaccine protocol, or does it become specific depending on the size of your operation, what kind of animals you have, where you're located, all that kind of thing?
Can be very,
and I'm sure the producers know this. I just wanted to throw
absolutely.
that out.
And every operation is different. Yeah. And when we say that, we would have a standard sort of protocol that we would issue to cow-calf producers. Well, we would evaluate each one differently because...
And so maybe that's an area too, that having that conversation allows a producer to go, okay, maybe I should use this vaccine.
It's all about risk. And so, for instance, if a producer is pasturing cattle against neighboring cattle, if a producer is commingling with other cattle or other producers' cattle, increases the risk to disease, and so that's sort of the job of vaccines, is to minimize that risk.
All right, guys, and whoever wants to jump in on this, help me out with biosecurity. What's biosecurity?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of basically preventing, that sort of prevention of disease entering your herd. I always kind of look on it from, we can go biosecurity on a nation.
Is it like the NHL bubble?
Keeping COVID. Yeah, like the NHL bubble. So we can go the nation at the airports and all that. And if we get it right down to your farm or your local, it's doing that cleanliness, the biosecurity, kind of foot dips in some cases. I always say vaccination is probably one of the most important forms of biosecurity, in the sense that what diseases are in the neighborhood and you're going to try to vaccinate to at least prevent them. So you're increasing the protection that the cattle have against those diseases. And the other way is to prevent organisms from coming on, and that's the hygiene, cleaning the boots, not letting the neighbors. Pat alluded to calving season, and that's the one where I'd say the cow-calf guys are really strict on biosecurity. They don't want visitors. They don't want people. They don't want to bring a calf in from another farm and adopt it onto one of their cows, because that will bring in disease. So it's sort of a culmination of all those things in my eyes. It's just, preventing disease organisms, maximizing protection. As a result, you're not going to get sick cattle. Yeah. Is my way of looking at it. So again, related to COVID, because with COVID, we're at that time, right? The distancing, that whole thing, trying to not get crowding, that sort of thing. Sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Well, so Roy, a really good example, Daryl, you're looking for examples of biosecurity, is had a scour outbreak in a group of heifers, Roy. It was 2 miles from the main farm, so the cows were no scours in the calves on the cows, but scours in these heifers, and so we had talked to the producer about the last thing you do is check this heifer pen. Then you clean up. You never go back to the cow pen. And so, a week into this, the operator says, I got it in. I got scours in my cows now. Then the calves on the cows. And how can that happen? And we're doing all these things right. And we're in the heifer pen. And as we're standing there, up rolls the feed wagon. I said, "Where's that guy coming from?" Well, it's coming from the main farm. And he was coming into the heifer pen to feed the heifers, where it was highly contaminated with tractor and feed wagon, taking it back and going through the cow pen to feed the cows. And so that's how we got scours from one end to the other. And that's where they had a breach in biosecurity. They should have had 2 separate feeding outfits if they were going to do that. But they likely brought it to the cow herd just through the feed wagon. Yep. So it's easy enough to move those contagious bugs on humans, equipment. Doesn't matter.
All of that can work.
It'll get there. Yep.
So it's interesting, as I hear from both of you, for the most part, I hear that producers and veterinarians seem to be working fairly well together. Is that the case? And if that is, there is always somewhere that there needs to be some improvement. So I will throw that at both of you. And Pat, you got to talk last. So Roy, I'm going to go to you next. What area really needs to be improved? Where, as best you can, try to isolate what either feedlot operators or producers and veterinarians, what everybody needs to do better, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of all-encompassing
I know,
question.
that was cruel,
I want to make it clear to the I want to make it clear to all the viewers out there. This isn't the majority of the producers, but we're probably the communication thing is key. I think the communication and trust in the veterinarian, most of the times, your local one, the one that you can get to do if you start even in emergencies and your herd stuff, you got to have faith in them that they're going to help you, with the most economic solution to the problems. I think that's really that communicate that all came in with the antimicrobial thing being taken out of some of the feed stores and that sort of thing. Yeah. I think what people have to realize is the veterinarians are not there to try to sell them drugs. I mean, we're basically trying to minimize the disease thing and maximize their production on their farms. Antibiotics and stuff can be a necessary way to get there at times, but over time, we're trying to really minimize that. And we're really focusing, as Pat says, we don't like to really see the sick ones. We'd rather prevent it, and then we start looking at productivity, how we can get the cattle to gain more, whether it's implant programs, whether it's whatever, to try to maximize their returns. That's right. When the farmers do better, we do better. I mean, that's always the way I've looked at it. Yeah. And again, we're tasked with this antimicrobial stewardship, and we together want to try to minimize that because it's going to be to the benefit of all of us, really, at the end of the day.
I have a way to get you there, but do you want to jump in on that, Pat?
No, that's good, Roy. Yeah, and I mean, the feedlots are obviously way ahead because it's a business, yeah. And they have a lot of risks that they have to deal with because they have increased numbers. But every day I spend time on a feed yard, and so we're in constant contact with these guys. The cow-calf guy is the guy that we see the least, and when I say see the least, we want to have them as continuous clients. We want them to feel free to phone us up if they got issues to talk about these sorts of things. But we just don't see them as often as we would in a feedlot. So trying to bridge that, to make that relationship with a cow-calf guy is a little more challenging.
Well, and I think you've said it as we've had our conversations before. Prevention is always a lot less expensive than reaction after the fact, right? Having to come out and treat. Ideally, if you come out once a year, that's more than enough. That's all you'd really want to do, isn't it?
Yes. Well, we like to be there for a couple of reasons, but those are preg checking and semen testing bulls, which is just a normal procedure. Yeah. But we're dealing with healthy animals rather than the sick ones. But as you said, treatment is far more expensive than prevention, and so we as old guys, we spend all our time trying to prevent things.
We as old guys.
How's that, Roy? Does that fit you?
Yep. Does that fit you? Yep. I might fit all three of us. It's a worrisome trend here. One further area that I just want to touch on before we wrap this up. I'm surprised we haven't had a few more comments or questions. Maybe you guys are just answering all the questions perfectly. Is there any more of this sort of mythical creature, the ones who no longer trust and just think that people are trying to get money out of them? Do you think that even exists hardly anymore?
Well, everybody's got their opinions, and so there is going to be the fringe, but they've seemed to exist without veterinarians. So that's the challenge. Is they seem to have done or seemingly well without us, and again, we're there for everybody. But we're not knocking on doors either. So those that come to us and believe in us and make us part of their team, then that's where we spend a lot of our time. Yeah. And again, we see this, and Roy probably saw this in Westlock. I mean, you'd see the occasional producer on an emergency type basis, but the majority are there. You're talking to them routinely.
Well, and am I not correct in saying that there is essentially a shortage of large animal veterinarians in Alberta? There's not a lot to go around. So for the most part, you guys don't really have time to get to. There are enough more critical issues that doing the day-to-day stuff, the stuff where the cost could ramp up, you actually do want to stay away from that anyway, don't you, Roy?
Yeah, I mean, there's two trains of thought there. I guess there is just one train of thought. Some of the clinics have got it where there's haul-in facilities, so there's a way on the individual animal basis that we can make ourselves pretty efficient. But yeah, driving all the way out to look at one animal and around. They try to do it as efficiently as they can, but the booked-in stuff, the routine stuff, and generally, and I think Pat would allude to this, they're always happy to see us on the routine stuff where we're trying to increase their productivity rather than they got animals dying everywhere, and we're trying to, and then we want to convince them though that a dead animal, and Pat works with this in the feedlot, that they use those autopsies to really help with the herd prevention, because you want to find out why animals are dying so that you can go backwards and prevent that thing from happening again. So there is a shortage. Some areas more than others. Some of the rural areas are pretty short. There's a few more veterinarians graduating large animal now with Calgary coming on stream and increasing graduates, but it's still there's still, I would say, a short. Everybody's busy for sure.
I'm going to give you guys a few moments just come up with a final thought. With all the things that we've discussed, anything you think has either been missed or that you really want to emphasize before we wrap this up here. So I'll give you guys a few moments to just sort of thinking on those terms, because I don't want to just throw it at you. It's your last word, so I want it to be awesome. So in the meantime, I do want to tell you that there are more of these sessions down the road dealing with a lot of different areas. Next week, we'll be talking about equine health, so horses. And that's a whole different operation where you're anywhere from breeders to somebody who just has one horse or a couple, or in lots of interaction with lots of different people and different facilities, certainly. So that's a wide-ranging area we can talk about this same time next week. And then again, as I mentioned off the top of our live stream, this will also be available in an archive form. So you'll be able to go to YouTube or Facebook and see this. Then plus on the raisewithcare.ca website, we will have each of these sessions up so that you can tell your friends if you want them to take a look at it. And then also I encourage you to let other people know that these are going on once a week, so that if you want to jump in on one of the ones for next week or the weeks after, we'd love to have you and have your input and conversation as we go. So with that, I've given you enough time to come up with your final thoughts.
Yeah, I've got one too.
You got one.
Yeah.
You seem more surprised.
Well, yeah, because it just came to me. But so one of the things I would say to the cow-calf producers, because that's where I've been. That's where my sort of heart is. I'm loving the feedlot work, but the cow-calf guy, I would encourage him to just ask the question to the veterinarian, because this is sometimes people think they're asking stupid questions, or they just feel uncomfortable about asking the question, but that's what we're there for. And so those that haven't got an established relationship with a veterinarian or just haven't got that comfort zone, just challenge them, ask the question. Hey, how can you help me? Or I've got this issue. What can you do for me? And I think they'll be pleasantly surprised what they find. I mean,
and if not, you just go find somebody else.
Well, I mean, so sometimes you're limited to what you got. And as Roy said, all the mixed animal practices or large animal practices are busy, and it's a challenge for not just us in Alberta but Canada wide for large animal veterinarians. So they are busy, but again, it's developing that relationship. Yeah. That's the key. Relationship.
And Roy?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to reiterate that. I think the relationship is key. Don't be scared to ask those questions. You're going to, in certain instances, be asked to maybe bring an animal in, have them out for a herd. Always recognize that will be a learning experience, and you develop that trust. I don't know why, but for me, in practice, everybody that had faith in me, things seemed to work out better on their farm. I don't know. When they didn't have faith in me and I felt it seemed like I could never do any good. And it's funny, you kind of develop that. And it just seems to, Murphy's Law will kind of follow you sometimes. And if they develop that and have that trust, we can't save everything, but we're going to give it the old college try for sure. But the veterinarians will really try on that prevention thing. They really want to help into the future and prevent that. Again, we're animal welfare advocates, so we'll work with you on when you should use painkillers and stuff, which I think the producers are really coming on board with that and really way ahead of the curve. And I mean, I've loved working with them over the years. All the producers, and some will challenge you more than others, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And the bigger producers have sometimes bigger problems, but we're all working on it together to improve the facilities, improve the working environment, and and have a little fun at the same time. It's always always good.
Well, and the Joanne in northern Alberta, they have a polled Hereford breeder. Popped in to say hi. Thanks. Nice to see you as well. And I'm glad you enjoy these. Said thanks for doing this, and we will do many more of them. So Joanne, thank you for jumping in on Facebook Live and having a chat. Dr. Roy Lewis, Dr. Pat Burrage, thank you guys so much. Nice chatting with you. This is great. I'm going to go and get some cattle. Yeah, that way I'm not all hat, no cattle. I might just have a couple at least.
Good idea. We got some for sale, right, Roy?
Of course. Always
absolutely.
Have some for sale.
Yeah. We deliver too.
We deliver with a health protocol. Everything's all ready to go. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, and for all of you who joined in and watched, thank you very much. Amanda, who just popped in on Facebook Live as well. Thank you very much for watching, and for all of you who did. And we're talking horses next week. We have 3 horses still at our property, and so I'll have a little more insight into that, but we have expert. And that's Dr. Greg Evans is going to be here talking about equine health for next week. Same time, same sort of format, and I hope you'll jump in. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.
See you all.